This is Truth Be Told.
That not only are there reptilians here,
new evidence of UFO fleets.
We were close to nuclear war.
To help you transform so that you can live your highest truth.
We're not being told just because we're not ready for it.
Geostations of frequency, vibrational.
I was a homicide detective with LAPD.
UFOs increase. Visitations. The big hairy beast. No, we're not talking about my father, but we are talking about the legendary mythical creature called Bigfoot. Is Bigfoot an ancient ape species, or is it just another alien species that we just haven't titled yet? Well, today we have Dr. Simeon Hein on the show today talking about his new scientific findings in coherent energy matter and how these ideas have helped explain this paranormal phenomenon. And why is this creature seen around balls of light and other paranormal phenomenon? This question has been going on for thousands of years. Can we figure out the answers today? We'll find out. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios, the one and only Dr. Simeon Hein.
Hey, Tony. Thanks for having me here today.
I'm excited. When we talk about, like you said, the big hairy beast, I was like, oh, that's nothing more exciting about that.
True.
And I'm excited to have you here because we haven't talked really about Bigfoots in a while. And, over the years, when I first started almost 10 years ago, it was mostly we talked about, it was a primate, ancient primate that has been walking the earth, for thousands of years. And then as time goes on, we start talking about, interdimensional travel and, is it an alien species? And I'm curious, to jump right in. First of all, what is your thoughts on this? And then how did you get involved in the Bigfoot hunt?
Yeah, these are all really good questions. No, it's not a primate. I don't think there's very much evidence to back up the idea it's a primate. I think it's an idea that a lot of us may have had a few decades ago,
right,
myself included, from listening to overnight talk shows. I mean, Art Bell used to have many guests on his show, and they all went in the direction of this relic primate, Gigantopithecus blackie species. Right. Which there's no evidence that Gigantopithecus was ever in the United States. And there haven't even been any bones found of Gigantopithecus here. And then when you really start reading the witness accounts, Tony, there are people that describe Bigfoot, Sasquatch as having primate-like features.
Right, right.
Facial features. And if you look in the historical literature, Dave Paulides has written some books in this direction, going back, at least 100 years of newspaper articles. It would be described as a wild man, sometimes as an escaped gorilla. People don't know what they're seeing, and some of the juveniles do seem a little more in the direction of a primate, so you could forgive people for thinking they may have seen something like that. But there are too many descriptions, even Native American descriptions, where it's described as a person, a kind of a very strange person, actually, with abilities and characteristics that we don't have. And then you also have other descriptions of it where people say it looked more like a caveman on all fours, and even cat-like descriptions where it seems sort of ape, feline. So it's something that's been, I think, a source of confusion for a long time. It's definitely been something that when we look at the witness accounts, we have to go in the direction of more human than primate.
When did you come to this conclusion? And what was some of the evidence and some of the maybe stories that you maybe talked to people that have encountered Bigfoots? What started shifting that thought?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And Tony, this came to me through teaching remote viewing classes.
Oh,
I've been
nice.
Involved with since 1996 when I learned RV, fresh out of grad school, former statistics teacher. And, even back then, we were getting accounts of balls of light and strange luminous phenomena around people doing RV sessions. And there was that book that had been written by Jim Schnabel called Remote Viewers. It was an early history of the remote viewing program after it was declassified in 1995. And he, even in that book, which I remember reading way back then, he described weird creatures and phenomena showing up around the researchers working at SRI and Lawrence Livermore Labs, where Uri Geller had been brought as a test subject for remote viewing and psychokinesis. And those researchers reported seeing cryptids around their homes, really large birds that were just way too large to exist in our ordinary reality, even those that would come inside their homes. Small UFOs that would show up in the lab, people would see flying around, and other really strange phenomena. And so this isn't something I came across right away, but being open to the idea that people that are interested in RV and people that are around the RV field often come, they come in contact with other subjects. And because they realize that RV is real, because they've done it themselves and have been around other people that have done it, they're more open to phenomena than the average person or the average scientist. And I will say that RV also attracts people that have worked with the government, some out of curiosity of what the RV program was all about, since it wasn't declassified until 95. I mean, it went for at least 20 years.
Wow.
It's kind of a classified program. So I've had my share of people that have worked with NASA, people that have worked in NASA, people that have worked with the intelligence agencies come and take my RV classes. What gradually happened over the years is I started hearing Bigfoot stories. And I'm a slow learner. It took a while to sink into my thick skull that this mattered, because I was so ensconced in the idea that it was a primate. And I thought, okay, well, it's a rare primate and I'll probably never see it. And okay, that's what they saw. They just were one of the lucky ones. But it didn't fit that because of what the witnesses told me. Some of them experienced telepathic experiences where they would see the Bigfoot in their mind before they saw it, or others in their group saw it. And it was exactly what had been projected into their mind. Other people reporting like a sort of a mind speak. And then once you start researching the topic, you realize, holy moly, this is absolutely incredible what these witnesses are experiencing. It's not just the size of the footprints, the cries and the howls and the whistling, and even their gibberish sort of language. We call it gibberish. It would be their language. It's sort of like a very staccato, has a lot of whistles and clicks in it. And people might have heard that on the Sierra Sounds from Ron Moorhead. You can look that up on YouTube. Someone who had a lot of contact with this creature over the years up in the Sierras. I began to listen to what these witnesses were telling me, and finally visiting the Bailey Bigfoot Sasquatch Outpost, Bailey, Colorado. I saw a map of the Boulder, Colorado area. And there were all where the sightings had been, these wood structures, which it seems that these creatures create for some reasons that are important to them, teepee-like structures and big trunks of trees put way high up that no human could do very easily, footprints and so forth. And I was really shocked to find it was within a couple miles of my apartment in Boulder,
wow,
as close as the city park.
Wow.
Because it borders the mountains. The Flatirons are there. And then I looked in all the little towns, and people had seen what they would describe as a monster looking through that window 8 feet off the ground. And I realized that this was a hidden event. It's what sociologists call hidden events. It's things that people are experiencing, but because of fear of ridicule or the trauma that they received when they encountered the event, they don't talk about it. And that's what I realized. This was really the best example of a hidden event that I could come across, not just like UFOs and things like this, but this was something that was really off the radar because people don't think it will be believable to their neighbors and their friends and so forth. So that's why it took me a long time to get involved. I had thought it was a primate, and I kept listening. And then one thing I'll just say with this, when you start going to conferences and you listen to people that have been researching this for many decades, like Igor Burtsev from Russia, who has been studying 50 years, came to one of the conferences in Bailey. He told us He first thought it was a primate. Then he thought, oh, this is some sort of undiscovered human. This is researchers in Russia have a field called hominology where they study these creatures. But then he realized the reports of invisibility, levitation, gravitational effects, batteries failing, cameras failing. And now I'm thinking, this is just like all these other phenomena that we don't
sounds like a lot, UFO or type of phenomena when things happened. That's when I started talking with some of my past guests about a lot of UFO or other, like you said, other paranormal sightings in an area where quote Bigfoots appear. And that leads us to a question is, what are the similarities to UFO sightings versus Bigfoot sightings? And that's why I said, is it an alien species? Or what is your thought about, past giants in the Bible and giants that had been on this earth? We've hear about it all the time, about Smithsonian taking these big skeletons of giants. Is there any connection with the giants in the Bible?
I would imagine that there would have to be, because this is sort of a continuous record of accounts going back through indigenous tribes like Native Americans all the way back to the Bible and ancient texts like that, where they describe races of giants. And then you, again, as I mentioned, you see it all the way in newspaper articles in the U.S. in the 1800s. Even the Vikings in Newfoundland described seeing hairy giants that howled and had a really bad smell, which is often part of the Bigfoot encounter some of the time. And you would have to imagine, for, unless someone has evidence of what the Vikings encountered, they were encountering Bigfoot, Sasquatch also. Even if you look at the Quakers and some of the early settlers to the Massachusetts Bay Colony, they described seeing beings at the edge of the forest that weren't them. That
I didn't know about that.
Couldn't identify that were strange to them. And so given that these accounts are so continuous, going back hundreds of years and thousands of years, I think we're dealing with the same phenomenon. But the thing about it is, it's not easy to describe. This is a strange phenomenon, too. It's not just like it's some sort of wild man. If it was just a biological entity and that was the end of it, that was rare, we would have more evidence at some point about this. We wouldn't have these cases where people continuously say they were looking at it and it was just gone. It just seemed to either blend into the forest or vanish. But I've heard people describe this in so many situations that it convinced me that Bigfoot is actually possibly a type of human that's more evolved than we are as humans, and has abilities that we actually have to practice, like PK, psychokinesis, cloaking, invisibility. These are phenomena that we're familiar with in physics, and you can do the research, and this is not new to physics. I have a subscription to Science Magazine. I read about attempts all the time to create metamaterials, invisibility, cloaking. A lot of it's sponsored by the military or intelligence agencies. So you know that this research is going on, and it wouldn't be totally shocking to find out that there's a life form that already knows how to do it. And if it was really good at it, it probably wouldn't be sharing its secrets with us, would it? Because it probably likes having its own space where we can't actually observe it. So I would imagine that they are similar to UFOs, going back to your question, and also crop circles in some ways, because we saw many balls of light orbs around crop circles, camera failure, battery failure. I was so surprised interviewing witnesses a few years ago who said their cameras failed, their batteries failed around Bigfoot. They had brain fog for a day or two. Missing time.
I was going to ask you about that.
Missing time around Sasquatch. They don't know how they ended up back in their car. Sometimes they lose consciousness, wake up on the trail a couple hours later. If the Bigfoot had really wanted to get him, it would have done it while they were unconscious. But they seem to enjoy playing around with us, even scaring us to some degree, and following your car. A witness I recently had on my YouTube channel, Barbara, who was on a Smithsonian archaeology dig in the China Lake Naval's weapons station area that had been open to the Smithsonian for archaeology purposes, but was closed to the public. She said the one that they saw had glowing yellow eyes on a no moon that night, moonless night. But there it is. The eyes are emitting light like a Christmas tree lights, yellow with a slight green edge. We're dealing with a life form here, in my view, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, that just has abilities that are more akin to cuttlefish and octopus and creatures like this, electric eels, where they have just harnessed the electromagnetic fields and even quantum effects to their advantage, just like any species does. And it allows them to literally, at least if we can believe all these reports, and I don't see a reason to doubt it, it's come from so many people, they can literally disappear in front of your eyes. Or at least some of them can. There may be different species of them, but they are seen around UFOs. There's that whole book by Stan Gordon called Silent Invasion about this UFO Bigfoot flap in Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania. I mean, you go through that book, Tony. It's just your mind is spinning because you hear one report after another of the Bigfoot being seen, then the UFOs, and then sometimes the Bigfoot and the UFOs in the same field. You would just have to imagine that they're sharing the same frequency. Frequency as in terms of the, like channels on a TV. And you turn the channel and there's the strange channel. Sometimes we used to watch Star Trek on that channel. It was kind of strange enough. There's just different channels on the TV set. Now, we've always assumed this TV set we call reality has one main channel. And the rest of it is your imagination. Or it's just simply not as real as this physical reality. And we kind of sometimes make fun of people who have experiences with the other channels. But I think Bigfoot and UFOs and other phenomena like that show us there are other channels on the TV set. And it's not the hardest analogy to understand, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. And, I remember, interviewing many people that were abducted by aliens. And I'm curious because a lot of people have a tendency to be passed down through generations. And my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother all talked about being abducted. And, afterwards having psychic abilities or anything like that. Did you, in your research, ever feel or hear anybody that said it was generational? And did they end up having like any type of mind-altering experience of having ability of psychic afterwards?
That's a very good question. It does seem to some degree to be related to the person who's there, because even in the same group, sometimes someone will see a Bigfoot Sasquatch,
right,
and others won't. And then sometimes when they see it as a group, they can't agree what it looked like. I mean, they'll have very divergent descriptions of what the creature looked like. And so there is a lot of variation, and it seems to have something to do with the psychic perceptivity of the person, because people that have one type of experience, even this witness I mentioned, Barbara, just as an example, a few weeks ago on my YouTube channel, had seen ghost-like apparitions in her Massachusetts home as a younger person. And you get this sometimes, which means that it has something to do with us, too, in a way that's probably very challenging to understand. But it does remind me a little bit of this so-called hitchhiker effect, which we read about in James Lukatsky et al.'s book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he's a former DIA analyst and missile signals analyst, I believe, Lukatsky. And he writes this book about part of the OSAP program. You've heard about these government UFO. Right, we heard about ATIP when the New York Times article came out, and there was a predecessor to ATIP. Some people say this is what ATIP was. It was actually called OSAP. I haven't resolved this completely. Lukatsky says it was just called OSAP, Advanced Aeronautical Weapons Research Application, something like that program. But they go out to Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, a place known for this activity, where you see Bigfoot. You see cryptids, you see huge wolves, which have been called dogmen. and other creatures which we don't have names for. Okay,
right.
That look like, and they're huge. Sometimes they stood above the car of the people on all fours. Okay. And you also have UFO activity. I know people who've worked there who've seen some of these creatures emerge out of what seem to be like portals right in front of your eyes on the infrared camera. And Lakatsky writes about this hitchhiker effect of these DIA analysts, some of whom had been battle hardened in warfare, go home, and the creatures they had seen at Skinwalker are now being seen by their wives and kids.
Oh, wow.
In the backyards of their suburban Maryland homes. And then the neighbors see them. Now, it's not like
it's like a virus.
Like what?
Like a virus, just spreading.
That is the analogy that Lakatsky creates. He says it's like a virus. It's like a pathogen. We can use a medical disease model. I don't want to go in that direction just because I think there are alternative ways of looking at it.
Right.
Perhaps if you're in a threat-based government research organization, you think that way. I'm not blaming him for thinking that way. It just seems to me that being around these phenomena could change you in some ways that open you to perceiving aspects of reality. It might be unconscious. You might not even realize you're doing this, but even the people that you're around, you're changing. Well, we all know we change other people by the way we feel and our vibes.
Well, it's like the Christmas spirit.
The Christmas spirit. There you go. It's like the Christmas spirit, but just sort of like inverse
the other
Christmas spirit. Where the creepy crawlies come out. You know, Krampus and creatures like this.
Right.
Yeah, no. So we know that this is heritable in some interesting, energetic way. But Tony, this is an important subject. We're not having any national discussions about it. This has been really classified, and this is why people go into the woods or around their homes at night and see these creatures and are completely shocked, in some cases traumatized, by what they've encountered in their suburban rural area homes. Is that we have never been told that these are real. I was never told, and even after I heard it. And Tony, I did go to UFO conferences where there were presenters about Bigfoot. There was even one at the SSE conference, Society for Exploration, which is a more academically based organization. At the Washington, D.C. meeting, I believe 2015, 2014, there was a fellow from Texas, and he said, and think about this, he would leave puzzles for them out in the areas where he knew. Oh,
that's interesting.
Camp, and they would like to work with puzzles, and they would change things around. And we know about this, again, suggesting it's not a primate, but it's a very intelligent human-like creature somewhere on the lineage here. Because they would do puzzles, you would leave things for them, they would leave other things for you. And I know people that this has happened to. So it's called gifting, actually, and you can create a kind of reciprocal relationship with them. But the surprising thing was that they like puzzles, sorts of puzzles. They like to work on puzzles, which shows a human-like intelligence, not something that's like a primate.
Well, now I know what to get them for Christmas.
Rubik's Cube.
Right. I have never personally seen a Bigfoot, but I have experienced a ghost, and I have experienced a UFO with my mom and two sisters and brother when we were in a car out in the middle of the country in Kansas. But my sister, Susie, she actually used to clam. They used to, the freshwater clams, and her husband were out clamming on the river, and they heard a scuffle and did see a tall, walking like a man. They could tell it was furry or had hair on it, and walking at a very fast pace. And she said they went up after that, startled them, of course, and to look, and it was gone. But again, the experience happened once. And
where did it happen, Tony?
This was in Kansas.
Kansas,
which is because I've not heard of too many Bigfoot stories in Kansas, but
now, it is so surprising. It's in every state, including Hawaii. People always say every state but Hawaii. Right. I have listened to witnesses describe seeing them in Hawaii.
Wow. Interesting.
And Kansas. I mean, think of all places. It's not like that's the most forested place.
No, not at all.
We think of this as a forest dwelling creature.
Right.
But here, is this, you said your sister?
It's my sister, yeah.
Your sister sees one in Kansas, which isn't known particularly for its huge forests.
No, it's just some small woods.
Small woods. The barber I mentioned a few minutes ago sees it in the Mojave Desert. I mean, that is what leads me to think it's not your typical biological mammal life form. It's not distributed in the way that you would have it if it was related to something like bears or primates, which prefer cover of some sort. You don't have a lot of primates living in deserts. It doesn't make sense. They have this ability to modify their environments in a way that works for them that I don't completely understand. I'm told another big hotspot is Nebraska, right next to Kansas.
That one. That's another one you wouldn't think.
Lots of rivers, lots of
rivers.
Protected rivers by cornfields and deer. Yep.
And that leads me to this, that I notice a lot of times they were talking about sudden temperature changes.
Right.
And do you feel, because like when they did go to look in Kansas, I mean, we deer hunt, all this stuff. We can see the deer running across, maybe in the woods, but there's fields all over the place. So they have to go out into the fields to get to the next woods. So they didn't see it go out of the woods, but they couldn't find it. So do you feel the sudden temperature changes are portals opening? Is that possibly one of the reasons the temperatures change?
That is what dark matter.
Oh, there we go.
That is what this book is about, is why do you get these sudden temperature changes around Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and many different types of cryptids, UFO sightings, and all sorts of interesting types of exotic matter. I mean, in dark matter monsters, I'm arguing they're the same phenomena. This is why you get those sudden temperature changes anytime you have matter condensing or expanding. Yeah, this is what really intrigued me, Tony, and this is why I had to write the book. There is a whole subject that people might be familiar with under the name cold fusion. We had the researchers, Fleischman and Pons at the University of Utah, who made public results of their cold fusion experiments, and other people have reproduced it. It may not necessarily literally be a cold fusion, but maybe some other processes are going on there, more like a type of compression of matter. But in all these cases, it's an example of what we call coherent matter. And if I can just explain this,
sure.
We're all familiar with the three fundamental types of matter that we're around every day. Solid, liquid, and gases, right? Mm-hmm. But we're also familiar with plasmas because we see those in neon bulbs. Fluorescent bulbs are plasmas, and there's tons of interstellar plasma out in the galaxies. Aurora borealis is a type of plasma, lightning. If you take plasmas and you organize them in some way, or they self-organize into their own toroidal or spherical form, like they often do in ball lightning, that's a fifth state of matter called coherent matter. And some people call them plasmoids to differentiate from plasma, but it's self-organized matter. Once it starts self-organizing, it's going to change the temperature of its environment because it's either going to be creating a lot of heat, excess heat, cold fusion experiments now called LEN, or low energy nuclear reaction. Some people have thought maybe we could generate energy and heat from this type of coherent matter as an energy source. But when balls of coherent matter like ball lightning dishevel and come apart and go back to being ordinary matter, again, they lose that kind of coherency. Yet when they're all at the same frequency, they become really compressed and they're generating heat. But when they come apart again, they reconstitute into ordinary matter. They form all the elements in the periodic table and they suck in tons of heat. And what do you get? Cold, cold, cold. And this is what Bigfoot witnesses and Sasquatch witnesses report often, is it gets icy cold before the creature shows up. The temperature changes suddenly, inexplicably. And then as the creature goes away, it gets warmer again. Where else do we have this? Ghost sightings. I
was going to say, that sounds like a ghost to me.
Houses, UFO sightings. I've spoken to witnesses. They said as they saw the craft over the apartment building or wherever they were in Florida, it got icy cold and it was July and they were only wearing a T-shirt, as you would in Florida in July. All of a sudden they wish they had a jacket. Then it warms up again. to me, and again, I'm open to other explanations, but to me, this is indicative of coherent matter forming and coming apart, which is a big clue to me that cryptids are creating coherent matter through vibration, through sound, through some other means of compression, and harnessing this energy in their own way to give them special abilities or to allow them to do things that we ordinary mortals don't quite know how to do. But I think it's a big clue that tells temperature changes. That's a sign that you're around a different state of matter.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because I don't know if you've ever been to that's a silly question. You have been to woods and forest.
Oh yeah.
But I grew up in Granola, Kansas. 300 people in the town, but we live in a valley, so there's a lot of woods, and up on top of the valley, it's pretty much just open plains, the Flint Hills of Kansas. But I've been through those woods growing up all my life. And I remember I would walk through the woods, and all of a sudden, it would be a nice, comfortable temperature, and then it would just drop and just be like, oh my God, it was like a chill. And then you walk a little bit further, and then it would go back to regular temperature. And I was like, how does that happen? And now that it makes sense that, it could be almost like a portal type of.
It could be. I mean, there are other reasons temperatures change.
Right. But it was a drastic drop.
Yeah, well, did you notice, did the birds get very quiet all of a sudden? Did the
Possibly.
animals?
I mean, that's been a long time ago. So this is another thing that you get. So here's another symptom, Tony, that's going to indicate that you should start paying attention to what's going on. You're going to get that temperature change, and or you're going to get a sudden quiet. I mean, too quiet. Right, you're like, what's going on?
The insects are going to stop chirping.
Right.
And that, again, is an indication of some sort of physical change in the physical constants of the environment, whether it's like permittivity, which has to do with electrical capacitance, or permeability, a magnetic sort of constant. But if the insects stop chirping when Bigfoot's around, which we hear over and over again, and the other cryptids, to me, that is evidence that you're dealing with another state of matter. Because the last time I checked, the crickets don't stop chirping around me unless you're really close to one. You're trying to find it in your house or your trailer, and they're good ventriloquists, so you can't quite hear them. And you're looking around, they stop when you're right there. But then they start again when you back off a few feet. But this is a case in the far, and I've talked to people who've experienced this. It was so severe it led them to leave the campground. It just got quieter and quieter, and it got, like, as they said, deathly quiet. And all of a sudden, they start getting this really morbid feeling, and a terror starts building. This doesn't always proceed. Not all encounters with Bigfoot are like this, but some of them are. And this was enough in this particular individual's case. I wrote about it in Dark Matter Monsters. He actually left this campground near Granby, Colorado, because he just said it got worse. That feeling of terror just built, and it can go past a point and I've ever experienced, or many people have ever, where it's just, you can't help but want to run, but you can't see anything. It's just too quiet. Something's wrong. Again, to me, that's it's another state of matter. People often describe it looking like the Predator in the movie Predator.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
the Predator movie franchise. Alien vs. So that sort of shimmering sort of appearance. Tony, people have seen this. People have who I never mentioned the Predator idea to would say, it just looked a little bit like the main character in Predator. It was like a shimmering sort of outline of a bipedal.
Have you seen the new one on Hulu?
No, I haven't.
It honestly, I feel it's one of the best ones because.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Because actually, it was dealing with Native Americans.
Oh wow!
And it was back, I think, in the 1800s or even further back, and it actually was a really good one. You should check it out if you like the franchise. But that's fascinating. And what do you suggest to people when they do feel that? I mean, like you said, because humans have a tendency to fear, or there's people that are just completely unaware of any of their surroundings, so they may not even notice it. But what mindset should you have if that occurs?
You need to start paying attention. You need to start paying attention to what's going on around you.
Okay.
it's not necessarily a sign that you're going to be harmed, but it could be.
Okay.
And we don't know enough about it to know exactly what's going on here. If you talk to Ron Moorhead, who encountered Sasquatch more than many, many researchers I know since the late 70s, he would notice these. If you read his books, The Quantum Bigfoot or Voices in the Wilderness, he talks about these strange phenomena happening around his camp, the hunting camp, with him and the people he was up there with. He even brought up skeptics, Al Berry. He wanted skeptics up there to see if they could make sense of what was going on. They would have strange light phenomena. They would hear strange sounds. And it was always around the time that the Sasquatch were also around. So when any of these phenomena happen, if it gets suddenly cold, if it gets really quiet, you start feeling that sense of terror. I just spoke to someone who had it happen on a trail the other day, and she was just out there with her dog. And because we had talked, she realized it could be a warning sign, and she just turned around and left. It was a feeling of being watched, but there was no other cars in the parking lot. And that's what they can do. They project an energy, maybe to get you to leave. Maybe it's just unintentional on their part, and you can start feeling it. You could either turn around and leave or just start paying attention. Maybe they want to make some contact. Maybe they want to say hi. But you really should rely on your instinct. If it really does feel like a bad feeling and a dangerous feeling, you should probably leave, because it progresses from there to throwing rocks. They start with small pebbles, and then they get to bigger rocks and
boulders.
They do get to boulders. In Dark Matter Monsters, I have a witness, Lauren, who says she experienced this at Estes Park, hiking with a friend, Rocky Mountain National Park, and she described a huge 10-pound like rock coming just between her and her friend on a path.
Oh my gosh!
Enough to knock the friend over, but it didn't touch her. It was that close you'd be startled and fall over. They do things like this, and people often say, which is probably true, if they really wanted to hit you, they would. They're very good with aim. But you'll see the stones start to come in. It's so consistent, Tony, with the witnesses. It starts with small pebbles, and it can proceed to larger rocks, to boulders. And if you don't leave, they can start trashing your car. They can throw them and break your car. And as one witness said the other day, it was a radio show host. He described it to me off the air afterwards. He said he didn't think the insurance company would believe it was a Sasquatch that damaged the vehicle. But they can really crash the vehicle if you... I think it's a territorial thing. But then some of the juveniles can just be curious. We just don't know enough about what we're dealing with here. There's a whole range of behaviors and possibly a whole range. Just think how complex humans are. So,
do you feel that most people see one, or do some see multiple at the same time, like a family or?
Yeah, people see families. I think it's less common people see entire families.
Yeah.
I've read accounts about that in different states where people would see them on a regular basis. They said they would see them around where they grew up in rural areas. They would see them off in the mountains. They would hold binoculars. They could see them walking. It was like mom, dad, and the kids out for a stroll. They enjoy walking just like we do. No, people meet families, and I think it's better off if you meet them in with others around. They don't seem to be quite as... Well, I could be wrong about this. They just don't seem to be quite as hostile when they have females around. The females, and there's that case of Claire, who I dedicated the book to right in the beginning, who had a very violent encounter at the Sea Otter Reserve near south of Carmel, California, where she was just taking pictures. She was an interpreter for a company from the UK, and she decided to take the day off. Goes to the coast. She's sitting there with her camera, and she said they came out on the beach, one male, a couple females, and some juveniles. And you can listen to her encounter. It's on Sasquatch Chronicles, and it's just really shocking. Her lens, they didn't see her, but the lens falls off the camera, and the male gets really upset. And she said the way it charged at her, it was so unbelievably fast to go from something that was just pulling seaweed out of the ocean and giving it to the females. It all of a sudden became extremely agitated, hit its fist into the ground. And the last thing she remembers was the females arguing with the male. She got the feeling they were trying to restrain the male. But
Wow.
she woke up next to the car bruised. They had dragged her back to the parking lot as a way, get out of here.
Right.
They are we've been around them for so long, but we don't have any contact with them to understand what they feel is their territory versus ours. This is a whole unexplored area. It's been a prohibited topic in many ways, and we're living next to them, and yet we don't know very much about them, and we don't know exactly how we should be relating to them. Some of them seem to be okay with humans, and people describe having long-term relationships with them in the area. No biggie. They say they miss them when they're not around. And other times like this, you show up at a wildlife preserve, and they're just, you could get a really agitated one, which isn't going to be very pleasant.
Right.
Tony, the people say that the yell of the Bigfoot, the scream, is loud enough to make your clothes and internal organs vibrate, like being in front of a rock concert speakers for a heavy metal concert. If you've ever been in front of a speaker like that at a big concert, just temporarily, you'll feel everything's shaking. That's how loud it is. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Oh no, yeah, I've heard. I've not heard the screams, but I've heard that people saying the screams are just, one that you don't want to experience for sure.
Your ears are going to ring.
Yeah, right. Well, we just have a few minutes left, and I love this conversation. I could probably do a part 2 and 3 on this, but writing this book, was there anything that you feel like that there was something you really didn't know that you learned and really stuck with you about, your thoughts and your theory on this subject?
It seems to me, and I'm still researching and learning more every day about this topic of condensed matter. It's a whole area called condensed matter physics, and this is a subset of it called coherent matter. There's an entire area of research that we should be looking into about how nature works, dark matter itself. The book has dark matter, and it's titled this sort of particles that come in from outer space that are invisible, but cosmologists call it dark matter. It seems to interact with us energetically. And there's just so much we don't know about the cosmos and the physics of what makes nature work. And are there other energy sources that we could be tapping into, evolving around, that nature's already using, that appears other species of creatures, life forms, are already using this to their advantage. And it seems to me there's a lot more we could be learning. And the second lesson is, don't be afraid if you've had experiences that don't fit in the box of what you were told is real by your teachers or your parents when you were a younger person. There's a lot more that's real than we officially admit is real. And this is why we're having UFO hearings right now in Congress.
Right.
And the Pentagon has been asked to supply a yearly UFO report to Congress, even though they're late this year by over a month. It's the first year they were supposed to, it's supposed to be the second report. They haven't turned it in. But it's very clear to me, Tony, and I think our listeners probably know this already, there's a lot more phenomena that are real. And just because it's not socially acceptable and there's been a stigma around it doesn't mean that you didn't experience it.
Right.
Strange as it might have been, just like your sister did. You should feel comfortable to share, talk about it with friends and people to find out maybe they've experienced the same thing. I think we'll learn more if we open up to these subjects a little more. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. But I think together, if we start having a national conversation about all these phenomena that we call paranormal, we'll have a better sense of what is the science behind it. Who are these entities? What's their motivations? I think we've got a lot to learn. I think we're going to learn it's a much bigger universe than I thought it was. Any of us did. And
I agree with you. And that's why March 31st and April 1st of 2023, we're actually having a Parapod Festival. It's all paranormal coming together in Santa Clarita, California. It's a film festival, podcast awards, and conference. And we may have to give you a call and see if you could come and
be a lot of fun.
Speak on it.
That sounds like a great conference, Tony. By the way, I'm happy to send people signed copies of any of my books at newcrystalmind.com.
Do it. Yes, please. Go to New
I
Crystal.
have a link to send signed copies because I just love people correspond. You know, Tony, every time people read these books, they write to me. He said, Simeon, I had a similar encounter.
Oh my gosh, I love
you
it.
mentioned it, and this is what happened to me. And it's been so great hearing from so many folks. It's like, just like your sister, it's like, how many people have experienced just Sasquatch, Bigfoot alone, and they never told us?
A lot of people. There's a lot of people.
Forgot about it, you know.
Yeah, a lot of people. And we hope to be sharing that soon at the conference, and also pick up the books at newcrystalmind.com. Okay. Dr. Hine, thank you so much for being on Truth Be Told. Thanks. We really appreciate it.
Tony. I really enjoyed it. Let's do it again sometime.
Oh, don't worry. We will. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we hope you come back and listen to us again every Friday for Truth Be Told with myself. And then Bonnie Burker does her show, Truth Be Told Transformation, on Wednesdays. And Robert Hensley does Minuteman Report on Monday. So until next time, I'm Tony Sweet, and we'll see you at Parapod in April. Bye. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows. This has